Okay, this is Sarah Wolf calling to order the remote September 21st meeting of the Manchester-Essex Regional School Committee. Welcome to everyone who is joining us tonight and to 1623 Studios for posting the meeting for us. We will begin with public comment. I just want to take a moment to remind everyone that this is an opportunity for comment, not debate. As our policy states, a school committee meeting is a meeting of a government body at which members of the body deliberate over public business. We welcome the attendance of members of the school district community to view your school committee as it conducts its regular business meeting, but these meetings are not designed to be an opportunity for dialogue. Please know that while we will not be immediately responding to your comments or answering questions, we are listening and paying attention to your concerns. During the meeting, we will be focusing on items that are listed on our posted agenda. If you would like to make a comment, please put your name and town in the chat. Please do not make other comments in the chat. We allow 20 minutes total for public comment, and we ask each person to limit their comments to 3 minutes. Ooh, I just realized I don't have my bell. I will be timing the comments tonight, and I will give you a reminder when you're getting close to your 3 minutes. After public comment is over, the chat function will be turned off to let us devote our full attention to the meeting. So I'm checking the chat. I'm not seeing any public commenters in the chat except for Jake. Oh, Nina is in the chat. Jake is in the chat. Jake, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Great, thank you. So, and I did email these comments to the school committee, so I will have additional detail there that I won't read here. But so my comments today center on the draft strategic plan documents you looked at your last meeting. I want to highlight several areas that will likely need some adjustment in order to successfully enhance MARSD programming. I'd like to share, however, that I am very appreciative that the district has taken a number of the recommendations and strategies that emerged from last spring's strategic planning work group. It's wonderful to see the inclusion of strategies for authentic learning, SEL, and diversity so prominent in the draft document. I also appreciate the drafted theory of action in which the if-we statements clearly relate to the core values, and the then statement expresses the broad goals for student qualities upon graduation. And for 3 of the 4 strategic priorities, SEL, diversity, and budget, it seems that there is a reasonable focus on each particular priority, and the included strategic objectives show a relatively explicit path toward advancement of each. The 4th strategic priority, however, for each of the 6 objectives that are included there to contribute to authentic learning environment are priorities in and of themselves. In my experience working with schools around school redesign, taking on just a couple of objectives like that involves substantive program redesign and professional development to create a noticeably different school. I believe MARSD is not intending to engage in a substantive program redesign. These objectives are meant to be enhancements to an already quality program. While I agree with and laud all 6 objectives, I think it is unrealistic to take them on all at once given our district context. I highly recommend that this list be narrowed from 6 to include between 2 and 4 of those objectives. Whatever set is ultimately settled on, each of these should be considered its own priority, with its own column in the strategic plan and a set of objectives that are equivalent in scale and specificity to the other 3. Looking then to what is necessary to support achievement of a slightly modified strategic plan, I encourage you to revisit the superintendent's goals. As drafted now, they are all about process with little indication about what the outcomes are or how they relate to the strategic plan. Just as one example, under student learning, under student learning, there is no indication of what the outcome will be as a result of doing the different things listed there. There should be some indication that these efforts will result in, for example, a collaborative and inclusive culture with some sort of measure to know that the progress has been made toward that goal. So I thank you for taking the time to listen, and I look forward to continued engagement. I know Pam recently just sent a note to the strategic planning workforce group from last spring to follow up on this, so thank you.
Great, thanks, Jake. And Nina, you're up.
Thanks, Sarah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. I do know it's in the agenda. Oh, sorry, I can start my video too. Apologize. I do know it's in the agenda to talk about transportation, later in the night. I had sort of two questions just on the communication. I know there was one of those robocalls last week when one of the buses, I think it was Lufkin Point, I can't recall the number, was late. There was a definite change to the Lowland Farm bus. It just doesn't come down our street. And the only reason I found out about it was a neighbor telling us. So just however it gets sorted out, we just make sure the communication's clear. And I did check my emails. And then the other added piece was just wondering, I guess, again, I know we discussed later, there's a lot of challenges. Hiring in general is very hard. If I recall correctly, we kept our contract with the busing company in Q2 of 2020 when everything shut down with COVID. I might be wrong there, but I think I remember that the school district had decided to keep the contract going. So I guess I'm just hoping our relationship, I guess, with Salter would be really good, just given that for 3 months when the bus, school was closed, if I'm correct, we maintain a contract with them. So that was all.
Thanks, Nina. All right, I'm not seeing anybody else in the chat. Is there anybody on the phone who is hoping to make a public comment? Okay, then I guess that's all we have for public comment tonight. And I will give my chairman's report. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. The school year is off to a great start, and in a lot of ways, things feel pretty normal. I was able to attend our first home football game on Friday night, and it was great to see. The team played well and won. The cheerleaders were enthusiastic. The Green Hornet was out there working the crowd, and the pep band was keeping everyone's spirits high. Lots of students and families were out enjoying the game. We want to keep this positive energy going despite the ongoing pandemic. So later we'll be discussing our annual goals. And the first goal on our list is to provide for the health and safety of students and faculty while maintaining the robust educational program, MERSD, and our member towns' values, specifically during the COVID crisis. To that end, tonight we will be discussing COVID protocols and mitigation strategies, as well as the impacts that the pandemic has had and continues to have on our district. We're glad to have you here with us as we have these important discussions. And with that, we have no student report tonight because our student Lucas has a prior commitment. So unfortunately, we don't get to hear from him tonight. So we will just go ahead and move on with our consent agenda, which includes warrants numbers 1009 and 1010, the minutes from August 17th and September 8th, and approval of out-of-state travel for the cross-country team to attend the Ocean State Meet in Rhode Island. So, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Warnock.
Thanks, Ken. Do I have a second?
Second, Burke.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, any discussion on the warrants, minutes, other minutes, or out-of-state travel?
I wasn't able to read that second set of minutes that came through at all. You may not need me for approval, but I know I can't. I just didn't have a chance to.
We can hold the second set. Why don't we take September 8th out? And so we'll amend the motion to just include the minutes from August 17th. Any other comments or discussion on any of those? It was kind of fun to see all the school supplies coming through in that first warrant. We got a lot of glue sticks and glitter and all the fun things. All right, so we will take a vote. We have to do it by roll call since we are virtual. So Eric.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
Ken.
Yes.
Teresa.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And like I said, Chris Reed is just going to be a few minutes late, so I don't believe he's here yet. All right, moving on to subcommittee reports. We can begin with elementary facilities.
Chris and I don't have a report because we haven't had anything to attend that we know of. Just that I know they did continue with the stakeholder tours, and that's really all I know at this point.
Awesome. I was playing around on the website today and I did see that it's really easy to find the video of the inside of the new Memorial School building. So if anybody wants to click on there and watch it, that's kind of fun. All right, Finance Committee. I don't believe you guys met again since last time.
No, we have a collaborative meeting on Friday.
Collaborative meeting coming up on Friday. Awesome.
Probably
Policy-
worth noting, we also have a joint boards meeting next Tuesday evening, the 28th, to just talk broadly about budget development, the process, some of the building blocks of the school-based budget, kind of an education session for new and returning members.
Awesome. Or anybody, that's a public meeting, right? So anybody could come who wants to come.
And-
Well, it's been posted by the Essex FinCom. Will it also be posted by us or just the Essex FinCom?
No, we will post at end of week.
Okay. Awesome. So
And
anybody
Pam,
who's interested.
I had a question about that, sorry. I know we cleared this up last time. Is it just Essex FinCom and Board of Selectmen, or is it Manchester's as well that we're planning on this for?
Sure, it's officially posted Essex, FinCom, Board of Selectmen, and School Committee. But Manchester boards are always welcome to attend and could attend either formally if they choose to post or just as members of the general public. But this is Essex focused.
Thank you.
I don't believe that the policy committee met.
Nope, we
Okay.
didn't meet.
And then I believe that Ken has a report for the negotiation group.
I do. Although we haven't been negotiating a lot, we have been meeting with the union. We are maintaining an open line of communication with the teachers union regarding working conditions, really around the COVID crisis. We meet with their leadership regularly to hear the concerns and really evaluate the situation together. The whole goal of this is to really make sure we keep everybody safe, healthy, and working together. But those kind of come up on an ad hoc basis, and we address and we have those discussions as needed. Again, with the intent of a major contract negotiation later this year.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
All right, Pam, I pass it over to you.
All right, if you just give me a quick second to post up a few notes, we'll be underway. Of course, I'm getting warning signs of all sort. My apologies. Looking at a couple of different screens here. Well, I can start. The first two bullets don't really need any text backup. I just want to start with the congratulations to the high school and the entire MERC community for its accomplishment in achieving the number 9 ranking on Boston's top high schools this fall. We see it as one measure, not the only measure, and it certainly isn't a process without controversy, but it is worth recognizing their continued efforts and the efforts of the entire K-12 staff to help students reach a high level of achievement as measured by a standardized process. We'll talk a little bit about MCAS tonight, not in great detail, but that's the basis for the rankings, or one of the key components in the methodology, and we continue to be strong there, and it's representative of that, as well as AP scores. Significant contribution from the community. The financial component is big in the methodology as well. So it's obviously worth celebrating, but we should just take it as one measure, not the only measure, when we look at the success of our students. So congratulations to all that made that possible. And then my second general announcement is around 2 new members of our staff, interim members of our staff. You know that Julie Riley left us at the end of the summer to take on a position as assistant superintendent in Andover. We were very lucky that the the person who is planning to retire from Newburyport, their assistant superintendent, Angela Bick, was willing to give of her time and come and join us and help us get through the year and keep our initiatives moving forward. So I just want to give a quick introduction to Angela Bick, who's here with us tonight to put a face to the name and say hello to the committee. So I don't know if you have any quick questions for her, but we are definitely beneficiaries of her expertise and experience. We are going to be well served.
Welcome, Angela.
And then I will throw it over to Tricia to do a quick introduction of our interim dean of students at the high school.
I think Angela was trying to say something, so I can wait if she
Oh.
wants to say something.
Thank you for catching that, Trish. Trish, why don't you jump in and do a quick introduction of Dan? Well, we have not necessarily set her up well yet with her tech, so I know her laptop's been giving her a little bit of trouble. So why don't you take it away and she can give it a shot, and hopefully she'll have a chance to say something in a moment.
So, as many of you know, Craig Maccarelli, our former dean of students, went back to work for the PBD school district. And I had the great fortune to be able to connect with a colleague I've known for a number of years, and Dan Richards. And Dan's joining me in the high school this year as the dean of students. We're kind of working in a partnership style. So far, it's been a lot of fun, and we're seeing some real positive impacts for our students. So I don't know if maybe Dan wants to say something.
Thank you, Tricia. It's a pleasure to be working with you after all these years, knowing you. And I will say that we certainly have a good time during the day, but we get to business as well. And I've enjoyed the welcome that I've received from the entire staff and students and families. And it's been overwhelming, and the students are always the highlight of the day. I'm not sure if anyone had any questions for me, but I'm happy to answer anything.
We're really happy to have you both on board. So thank you for being with us tonight to introduce yourselves. I got to meet both Angela and Dan on the first day of school, so I feel a little extra lucky there. Angela, did you get your mic to work? No, okay, bummer. I don't know, sometimes technology, yeah, okay. All right, Pam, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, what I'm going to suggest is I do have a couple of pieces that will benefit as I talk. If I wanted to talk about MCAS, it's going to be helpful to have a couple of notes up and a few stats for us to look at. So with that in mind, I also have COVID protocols in the same slide deck. I'm pretty sure I can fix it by a quick reboot on one of my devices. So it may be a good idea to jump to the transportation update if that works for the team. That way there we don't just waste time while I'm fiddling with technology. Okay. So I think I want to throw this to Avi. Avi is our point person on transportation. We were all surprised last week when we got a call from Salter somewhere in the 5 o'clock hour that they were having an emergency issue with a bus driver, not a long-term issue, but just a legitimate individual person's health issue that caught them short. And we scrambled and tried to notify everybody. We typically like to run a couple of tests on our system before we're doing all calls, but I didn't get too many responses that people didn't receive the call. So I think we were able to get the message out just at the last minute after communicating with the bus company. But that's just one of the trials and tribulations that we've been dealing with at the beginning of the year. So Avi, I think you would like to give a status report and just kind of share what some of what the state of the affairs is and what we might be expecting going forward.
Sure. Yes, thanks. And, every year, this is a time of year where transportation is a little bit in flux. If you've seen what we post on our websites for routes, they typically say, every year that we look at them and revise them in the first 30 days as an example. And this year is no different, and we get emails from families. We have, by the way, for those who might be listening, the schoolbus@mersd.org is the email where we try to get all communications going there so that, we can track them, which we do, and make sure that we're responding to people. So typically what will happen is you'll get inquiries from parents about things like, well, I see the routes are X and Y, and we have families here or there, and we'll respond to them and work with Salter to kind of make adjustments as the year goes on. That, from a parent standpoint, that's one of the two, probably the most consistent every year type of feedback we get at this time, other than, can you just remind me how to register? And the registration system has been pretty consistent. Just as a reminder to the school committee members, we are collecting fees again this year, which we've been doing. What's really different this year, and we experienced this once before pre-COVID, is the significant driver shortage that's happening really nationwide. If you've been following the news, you might have seen that the governor was talking about bringing in the National Guard to serve as backup bus drivers, just because it's been hard to get drivers. I work with the Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools, and I'm hearing, I'm hearing that in a lot of communities they don't have all their routes covered, and so we, our typical process is to make sure we're good to go with Salter, the company that to whom we outsource in the summer, which we did. They said, it's pretty bad in terms of driver shortages, but MERSD is covered. And so that was the update we got at the beginning of the summer. And by and large, that remains to be true, so that we have mostly fixed drivers who've been returning. I believe 2 of our routes are covered by interim drivers who've worked with us on some of our, our athletics or extra runs, those charter runs that happen afterwards. So people who work with our community before, but maybe aren't the same face that we're used to seeing year in and year out. But for us, that's been a lot better than a lot of communities where they simply don't have the riders. The problem is that the drivers, excuse me, is that things are balanced pretty tight. So, for example, with the incident that Pam mentioned, one of the drivers fell ill unexpectedly at night, and so we got an emergency call from Salter, as Pam mentioned, and we did our best to reach out and notify folks. In other situations prior to that, we had situations where they had to rejuggle routes if they had one person out. They do have they've used this in the past as a backup. Sometimes they'll have some of their licensed and certified and trained administrative staff who will pitch in for routes, and that has happened. And so it's really, they're shorthanded. We're kind of balanced on a pin. And so it just creates the likelihood that from time to time you can have some challenges. And we certainly heard that type of feedback this year in ways that we haven't in prior years, which is why I suggested to Pam it might be good to get this as a public agenda item for tonight. First, to say thank you to the parents who have been, by and large, extremely patient working with us and working with Salter, but also to say that we hear you. We're doing our best to respond to the emails that we're getting in with updates. For people who have questions about routes and route changes that we might normally be getting more timely responses, the truth is some of those responses are a little backed up from Salter, so we're a little behind there. But they have them, we're tracking them, and it just might take a little bit longer to work through some of those route questions. But in other cases, we're having situations where buses have run late. We've had people who've been waiting for stops and not been picked up. Things that really have not been characteristic of prior year bus service. And I just want to say that we hear that. We know it's been challenging. Again, we thank the families, and I just wanted to make sure people know that we're working on that. We're in active communication with Salter all the way at their highest management level. I did hear one question come up earlier, and I know since Nina had asked it and she had emailed me on Friday, I haven't had a chance to get back to her yet. But the answer to her question is yes, we do have a good relationship with Salter. We are one of, I believe it was 6 districts that were working with Salter. And during COVID, the Department of Ed recommended, some of the school committee member veterans might remember this, that school districts band together by provider. So the Salter districts would be one group, and work out a negotiation for how bus payments would work during the pandemic when routes weren't running, and how much savings could accrue to the district, how much of the payments were necessary to keep them from shutting down, and that sort of thing. And that happened in consortiums around the state. So we work together with other districts, and I think what we did then did help to keep Salter from, going, for some other providers did go out of business at that time. Salter fortunately did not. They've been there for us. And I think that partnership is strong. But having said that, it doesn't generate a supply of new drivers. I have been told that they have a couple in the pipeline who are coming through so that we can have dedicated drivers again. There is a rigorous training protocol, including a lot of compliance matters that are necessary, so they don't assign bus drivers until people can go through that process. So, but they have 2 folks, as I mentioned, who are identified who can help us to get back to consistent drivers for the year, which is the goal. While we're in this interim phase, it can lead to some bumps. So I think that's really the big update that I wanted to provide. And I certainly understand that for families, my kids ride the bus too. I get it. This is one of those logistical things that makes your day work. And when it doesn't work well, it can have a lot of ripple effects that can be really very inconvenient. So we hear you. Thank you for sticking with us. Please do send us your feedback. Every email we get does get reviewed with Salter. And so that's the extent of my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Avi. Does anybody on the committee have questions for Avi? Teresa's raising her hand. Go ahead, Teresa.
I'm always trying to wait to see if someone else has something first, but actually it's more of just a comment. First of all, thank you. I actually happened to get both the call and the email, and my husband texted me because he didn't know if I was going to check either of those things. So that worked out well, but I know it didn't for everyone. Just a reminder for all of us, parents and families, really, that while Avi and Salter are working so hard to do our transportation, in other districts, this is still impacting them. And so we need to be flexible, understanding that things like sports and other extracurricular activities, other people getting to us may be an issue. This came up last week for the middle school cross country meet, where another district had an issue with busing, didn't have anything, and they ended up, running about an hour late. So I think that we're all going to have to be a little flexible with our schedules, just knowing that this is going to continue to impact. But thanks for your hard work.
Teresa, that's a great point. And Avi, I didn't get a chance to ask you this today. Our intent is to be running the late bus this year. Has this impacted implementation of the late bus at this point, or
That, to my
have we
understanding,
not crossed that bridge yet?
No, to my understanding, it is running. We have arranged for it. There may be some hiccups there. And to be honest, I think the other question that I heard asked, I think we just want to deal with head on, is about communication. And I think it is true that we have a communication system set up, not just for the all calls, which are really last resort. We haven't really needed those for bus service since I've been here in about a decade. But, using the email, the dedicated email to respond to inquiries, we have a way to loop in families in Salter. And this year, because of the slow responses that we're getting, because they're really working, in real time to solve a lot of problems, I do want to acknowledge that the communication has been slower in terms of getting some resolution. So there have been some situations where I might get information from Salter after the fact, because in real time they're solving the problem and then they're alerting me. We're really stressing with them the importance of giving us the heads up ahead of time. And they've heard that message, and I know that they are working very hard to do that, which included the day in question. So there have been times where I haven't been, always up to date on that information, just because it's coming in a little bit slowly. So as I understand it, yes, it's been running without hiccups. But again, if you're out there and you have information to share anytime, please let me know. It certainly helps us to work with Salter to get individual items squared away.
Awesome. Anyone else have questions for Avi? I don't think so. Avi, thanks for being on top of that. I know it's really a lot this year. It's just one more COVID hurdle to get over, hopefully.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Pam, I was hoping that maybe we could get the CPAC report out of the way before you delve into your bigger report that's going to take a while.
Sure thing.
Cheryl, do you want to go ahead and do that?
Hi. Hang on.
Hi.
I'm just trying to, okay. Nice to be here and see you all. On September 10th, we had our 3rd annual CPAC Picnic, and this went after school until 7 p.m. We had a gorgeous day down at Tux Point with lots of food. We had SUP lessons from Cape Ann SUP, face painting, tattoos, yard games, crab traps. We had several student volunteers that came and helped us with setup and running all the different stations that needed some help, as it was just Christine and I kind of running the whole picnic. And we had, I'd like to thank Sarah for coming and representing school committee. And I'd also like to thank or let you know that we had several teachers and people that in the special ed staff that came to the picnic, and it meant the world to see for these kids to see the people that they work with showing up for them, and for the families to see, and it was wonderful to meet their kids. It was big honor for us, and we're just so we love our special ed staff. That's this year we had 84 responses and about 75 people came, which this is our 3rd time we're having the picnic, and every year it's grown and grown, and we couldn't be happier with the response. And I think it highlights to us that the special ed families are eager to connect and participate in activities and CPAC events and have this community. It kind of goes on the back of our 106 responses to our survey, which I think was about 80% of the special ed community, and Allison was saying more responses than she's ever had in a survey. So we're very enthusiastic about that. If you could have seen, it was wonderful. If you could have seen the kids, I mean, and hats off to Dominic of Cape Ann SUP. He brought 5 boards, and it was him teaching solo, and we had some parents that jumped on boards too, because we had so many kids that wanted to either paddle or swim next to, and they were just whipping around the harbor. It was incredible. It was so great. To me, it was a little chilly you wouldn't have known it from the 30 kids in the water. We had a ton of food, tons of faces painted. It ran till about 7 o'clock at night. We had some kids holding out that just didn't want it to end at all. We had, along with some of our high school volunteers that came, we had some special connections, older student to younger student, and setting up some future play dates with kind of mentorship with some of the kids in attendance, which is, you know, exactly what the kind of thing that we want to see and what the world needs now. So we're excited about the enthusiasm, the participation, the community, and now we just need to kind of figure out what to do with it all, how to fund it, how to structure some things. But we're looking forward to that, and hopefully getting some parents to step up to more leadership roles within our group. Thus far, we have not been able to figure out, it's just a very complicated thing, how to fund things and how to fundraise and get things done. So we're looking forward to meeting with Pam and Allison a little bit more and figure this out, because thus far it's been Christine and I throwing the events, funding the events, and now that it's growing and growing and growing, it's a lot for two people to do themselves. So, but all good stuff. It's exactly what we wanted to happen, and we couldn't be happier. And we'll be announcing our first meeting date soon as we get that together. But that's it. So happy report from the special ed community.
Thanks, Cheryl.
You're so welcome. Does anybody have any questions? Again, the staff and Sarah, you showing up, it really just meant so much to the families and kids, and it was wonderful.
It was a very lovely event.
And a beautiful day.
Thanks to you and Christine for putting that on. I'm sure everybody really appreciated it. It was great.
Thank you.
And Cheryl, let's definitely set a date to get together with Allison and talk about fundraising and communication, because Sarah did text me like you asked her to, and I just didn't even have it on my radar screen.
Oh yeah, I know.
I was disappointed.
We announced it at the final meeting. It is kind of tough because it is a special ed event. It's not an email or thing that's posted for absolutely everybody.
But we're happy to help with some of the internal communications.
Okay.
So you've got key people on your list.
Great.
So thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah. No, it was our pleasure, and it was huge success. So many more people than we ever expected. So, but it just shows that there's a need and that there's enthusiasm, after all these years, people, so I'm really excited.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for coming tonight and reporting on that for us.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Actually,
thank you.
Cheryl, before you go, I just want to say thank you. Thanks to you and Christine for incubating that. I'm sorry we missed it, and whatever fundraising mechanism is needed, I'm sure, whether it's with Pam and Allison or if it's even donations or whatever, please keep me in mind, and I'm sure everybody else in the school committee, we're very grateful to you for getting this rolling and getting it started. And I love that you said it's exactly what you'd hoped for, and it sounds like it's a fantastic start to really support that community.
Yeah, and to make it a prominent community within our school community, and excited for that.
It's awesome. Now, the next step is figure out how to sustain.
Exactly.
We can do that. Yep.
And structure it. The finance thing is extremely complicated. So with budgets and how to, yeah, but we'll figure it out. Right, guys?
We know who else to invite to the meeting then.
Bobby. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Cheryl. All right, Pam, back to you.
All right, thanks. And thanks for being patient while I solved that little tech problem. So we were able to get through the congratulations, the introductions. Unfortunately, I think Angela had to step off, but I just wanted to give a very brief update on our DEI work, which does relate to the goal that Jake mentioned. Best way to frame this is definitely a work in progress, and it's going to be a long process of reculturing our schools and our community. So I take Jake's point, and I'm going to think a little bit about what some of the immediate outcomes might be. I think I'm learning through the process that I need to be thinking in larger chunks of time. So maybe that's something Michael can help us with. So we will be working with Michael Eatman from Culture 7, and he is a consultant that specializes in executive coaching, leadership team coaching, and also teacher team building with a focus on developing culture as a means of expanding our DEI capacity. So we are just taking our first step into the process later this month with our first leadership team session. We'll be doing a 3-hour session at the end of September with him. And our hope is to build to a teacher training day mid-year around right around the September break when we have our teacher PD day. So that's a bit of a work in progress. So he's going to be available to the district for everything from the training and culture building, but also for crisis management should we ever find ourselves in a situation where we need some expertise to manage through a difficult situation. I know our neighbors are dealing with some issues right now. So he will be at our disposal for work like that as well. And he is someone who similar communities to ours on the North Shore are teaming with to do this work. So there'll be some inter-district sharing as well, I believe. Well, he's been in Newburyport for a year or two now. He actually knows and worked with Angela when she was the assistant superintendent there. So that's helpful for us in launching our process. I believe he's working with Pentucket, I think Triton as well, and I do think he's working with Georgetown. So we're very excited. I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to meet him along the way. And we're just starting to build our relationship. Great news, as of today, open houses, we foresee them going forward as they typically would with some modifications to the large group meetings that launch some of the beginning sessions. Open house runs slightly differently in each school. So we'll be meeting as a team on Thursday and just talking about how we may want to accommodate differently some of the launch events. But we're super excited to get people in the building. I know Memorial parents will be very excited to get inside. As Sarah mentioned earlier, we've tried to put up a few videos of what the inside looks like. It doesn't do it justice, and especially when it's alive with people, and especially with kids making the rounds. So good news and a good indicator that things are starting to normalize in school. And the MCAS data was released today, just another general announcement. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on it, but we have only begun to scratch the surface of what it means for us. So I'm going to give you really the 30,000-foot view with having about a day to look at some of the comparative data. So the student reports won't be going out to families for another couple of weeks. I think they're scheduled to hit the schools on the 30th of September, and we usually need a few days turnaround to get them out. So I would look for those the first week of October. And information on more of a school level and student level will be coming to you in the form of principal reports at the end of October and the beginning of November. What I'm going to just basically briefly comment on right now is kind of the big picture and what it's telling us. So we talked a little bit about data at the end of last year, and we had some concerns about where our kids were ending the year. I think the MCAS big picture data basically confirms what we knew and what we expected, which was COVID has had an impact on student progress. We're still trying to get a full handle on what that means. So what they released today was basically the whole package. So we're going to be able to drill down at each school. But if you look at the district level numbers in comparison to what they were reporting at the state in terms of how they were determining some loss on the year, we didn't differ too greatly from the overall state experience, but we start in a much stronger position from our history of doing well on this particular test. So a couple of things to keep in mind when you look at the numbers is that we did see some decline from 2019. There was no 2020 test during that first spring of COVID. So this is the first test since 2019. And in the 2018-2019 year, we had experienced some changes to the exam. So even the reporting is a little bit different. That's why the secondary, the high school scores are in a bit of a different bucket than these 3.8 scores. When we report the district numbers, and this is different from when we talk at the school level, it's inclusive of all students that are on our roster or what they call duly enrolled, and use the background barking. So it's not only students that attend our program, it's also students that attend out of district placements. As far as last year, they were students that continued in year-long remote learning. So we had students that returned to hybrid and returned to full in-person at the toward the end of the year. But we had some students who chose to stay at home throughout, right through till June. I would say they had a different experience, and that's something we'll look at. Was there some differentiation in scores between kids who took advantage of the opportunity to come back to school and those who chose to stay home? And then homeschool students could participate by choice if they wanted to. It was all given online. So just a couple of things to keep in mind when we're looking at the district picture. Everyone who is on our roll is included. So not just those who benefit from our instruction, students who are in other programs or specialized programs as well. The other thing to keep in mind when you look at the scores for the district as they're reported at the state level, we're looking at different students. So what it's telling us is what we were trying to figure out at the end of last year and what we knew from teacher reports, which is how were we at managing the curriculum and delivering the curriculum in 21 as compared to 2019. So we got two different groups of kids taking the test with somewhat different outcomes, but not drastically different outcomes. What we do know from our own reporting is our school year was shortened by 10 days. We moved much slower through the curriculum, particularly at the beginning of the year when we were adapting to online learning. So we certainly did not necessarily go as far and as fast as we typically would. And we were introducing material and learning new teaching methods on the fly. So all of those things I think are worth considering in looking at the 2019-2021 differential. One thing you'll see when you look at our accountability ratings is despite losing some ground, so at the chart below basically shows that we've established, we're still well above state averages in terms of our performance, and our slippage in performance mirrors, that's the two far right columns, it basically mirrors the state experience. So our scores were always much higher than state average. Our scores aren't as high in 21 as they were in 2019, but they slipped at about the same rate the general school population did throughout the state. That being said, in our accountability measures, so forward progress and growth and helping kids achieve at a greater rate, all schools report forward progress. So I think that's an interesting thing to take a look at. So we're given, and this will be saved for the two sessions coming up. We're given accountability measures or targets to hit each year to show that we are starting to close achievement gaps for students who don't score as well as others. And in the reporting, it's showing, at least on the top shelf level, that we are rated as forward progress in all of those areas. So I think that's a really big positive given the struggle to deliver instruction last year. This is just going to be another guide, another data point for us to plan our interventions and our remediation. And again, I think we're starting from a point of strength. So not unexpected. We had the same struggles as the rest of the state, but I think we're still making forward progress are the three top headlines. And we'll get into how this impacts each school a little bit later in the month. So happy to answer general questions if you have them.
Not so much a question, Pam, just more of
Yep.
a comment looking through the data myself earlier today. I did notice that there was a big discrepancy between the performance at Memorial and the performance at Essex on certain measures, and that the change seems to be more significant at Essex at certain grade levels and within certain measures. And so I was hoping that, you know, once everybody's had a chance to go through the data more, that we can talk about, I mean, who knows why that happened, but sort of, you know, we're on the other side of it. It did happen. What can we do about it now?
Yeah, I think one of the other pieces we're picking up, and I don't think I'm prepared to go into it tonight, is we've seen just in the high needs and the economically disadvantaged numbers, both at school levels and at district levels, it's significantly higher than it was in past years. Not that that's its only determinant, but there is some shifting in student population. We want to also take a look at number of homeschool students per school, which has, I think, an impact on the total number and some of the percentage derivation. So in answer to your question is looking at all of those things, and that will either be, I don't think we determined yet who's coming on which night, but it'll either be that last meeting in October. One of them will be middle high school and one of them will be elementary. So we'll be able to look and speak to just that. So if you have specific questions as you look at the data, it'd be helpful for the team to have them ahead of time so they can try and embed them in their discussions.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Pam.
No problem.
Just a broader of that kind of thing for us new committee members, can you help us know what to expect with a report out on MCAS data? Like what level of detail are we talking about? What kinds of things can we expect so that we know what we're coming prepared to
Executive
hear?
summary, and findings of the analysis and next steps.
So, but we can present with specific questions in advance to give.
That would be helpful because that will help them to determine whether or not they should focus on one particular area or the other. Yep. Anything else on this? All right, we can probably move into the agenda item on the COVID discussion topics, if that works. So just close this out. Again, please send along questions if you're seeing something in the published data that you'd like people to address as we go forward. So COVID management, not a huge update when you think about it as compared to what we were doing last year. Good news is, well, I don't know if it's good news. The good news is our numbers are minuscule in terms of reporting COVIDs. The state has asked us to post a weekly report up to them, simply identifying number of student positives and number of staff positives. The small chart on the bottom part of the slide shows our 9/13, 9/15 report, and it's showing you as of 4 o'clock this afternoon what our numbers were between the 15th and the 22nd. So unless something changes tomorrow, we'll be posting up no positives in this last reporting period. There has been some, and I've appreciated the questions about, are we going to be sending out the letters every time we have a positive in school this year? My initial thing, I said that this would be a great place to discuss it. My initial thinking is there was such a lag in the reporting last year. I'm not sure that it's really, I'm not sure what it does for us on a daily basis. People who are, should somebody be infected, should there be close contacts, people are being called and as soon as we have actionable information and given the direct information on how it impacts them and what options are available. I would like to, if you guys are comfortable with it, reserve large scale communications in the case we have an outbreak or a team needs to get quarantined, if it affects a large number of people. And what I'm happy to do is take the report here and make it a live web link. So anybody who's interested can be checking the numbers daily, weekly, whatever suits them to stay on top of it.
I like that. Anybody else have thoughts on the reporting of COVID cases?
I sent that question in. So or I at least was one of the people who sent that question. And yeah, I think just for me, it was an issue of I knew there were some cases and I wasn't getting letters and it was just a change. And I didn't know whether I should be expecting it or not be expecting it. But I do think it's helpful for people to be able to access that information easily if we want to. So I think that makes perfect sense as long if we're able to get
Yeah, we'll just publish the Google Doc, leave it as a COVID dashboard, and I can put out a note to everybody that says, at this point, we're going to, not go forward with the letter reporting and post numbers up to the weekly report. Obviously, if something starts to change drastically, we're going to go back and rethink whether it's time to do that. I think in the beginning, when I sat down and thought about your question, Teresa, in the beginning, we thought just having people with COVID in the building posed a potential threat. So it made a lot of sense at the time. I think we know so much more now about how it's spread and how to stop it, that someone just coming in, and I'll tell you, the nurses are on top of it. They are stopping people with MedBot, and we appreciate everybody taking the time in the morning to do the 2 questions. They're really trying to stop people from coming to school if they're sick and have symptoms. And that was our first line of defense last year. It worked for us fairly well, and we're starting in a similar position. So our goal is to keep people home, and in the event somebody comes in, it's dealt with rather rapidly. It's just playing out very differently on a day-to-day basis for everyone. The availability of tests, people's willingness to go and get one if they have any question. I'm very hopeful these are the types of numbers we're going to be reporting all through the year.
Okay. The wood a lot of knocking over here.
I just have a quick question. Was there, what was the reason that we were sending them out last year, and like, has that changed? Is that what we're saying, or?
It was given to us in a communications packet by the state, and every school was sending the same notice whenever a case occurred. So usually what happened, the case would occur, and about 3 days later, we could send a letter because we'd hear somebody was positive. We didn't have a confirmation, and we, in theory, did not send the letter until we had actionable information. So it was just something that it was recommended to us as a way to communicate the levels in the school.
Okay.
Is there a way, Pam? I know that some of the schools have weekly communication set up with families already. I don't know if all of them do, but I'm wondering if we could just include a link or like a standard reminder that this resource is available and here's where to check it.
Yep,
for
I can
families.
do that for sure.
Thanks.
And maybe, I mean, if it is easy for people to find it, when I speak with people, they tend not to, always open those emails and things like that. But if they want to find it, they should be able to pretty easily, right?
Yeah, I'll put it on the quick link on the front of the web page.
Yeah, or maybe we do give like a monthly update or something,
That's very simple to do.
Yeah.
For people who really watch it, I think they go straight to the state report, which we'll publish probably if we can leave ours live and keep it as a Google Doc, and as they update it, you'll have the real-time numbers. But every Thursday at 4, people who are on top of it know to go to WCVB, and the link is right there, and they can see the whole state report.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
Who would doom scroll in such a fashion to be checking it that often, Pam? I can't think of anyone who would do that.
And I can put it in, I'll leave it in as a link in the MERC Weekly, which will start up shortly. And it will, I'm sure there's a way I can pick it up to just having it as a standing article that goes out in that. I'm hearing you. Make it easy to find.
Yep.
Awesome.
So the testing program, with numbers like this, the test and stay program, from what we can tell, will be helpful to have, but probably receiving light usage, because again, unless you are unmasked and within 6 feet for an extended period of time, you're not going to get picked up as a close contact. And if you're vaccinated, you likely will be exempted anyway. But good news is we've received all of our supplies from the state, so we are ready to implement either a quick test if somebody is symptomatic, or the tested stay if they qualify as a close contact. So we have everything in place to be on top of it should somebody present. And then the next level of learning that the nurses are going to take on in preparation for winter sports season is something called EMED, which allows for some rapid testing of athletes over the weekend. It's a whole different process. I can't explain it at this point, but it's basically designed to provide an opportunity for athletes who are in question to test before they participate in interscholastic sports. Everything we offer in the fall is all outside, so we're very confident that we're in a good place and we'll be prepared to have that available when we enter basketball season. Then the only other thing under the COVID management umbrella is a couple of decision points for discussion, and the decisions don't need to be made tonight, but I thought I would throw these questions out there for the group to discuss and to get some feedback on. We've gone back and forth in discussions, and I think we've all had different opinions at different times about the necessity for vaccination mandate for staff. I did a very unofficial quick poll of the faculty, and of the folks who are in the building on a daily basis, that's about 240 people. I've heard from about 220, and of that group, through self-reporting, we are at a solid 98% vaccination rate, with the remaining 2% split between choosing not to and can't medically. So we are almost at 100%. So I guess the question is this something we'd like to look at going forward, or is it something we feel isn't necessary because of the participation rate? It's certainly within the committee's purview to make it a condition of employment. And it may be something we want to do now, maybe something we want to do in the future as this rolls out. So that's just out there for your consideration. There's nothing yet in out there to support us doing the mandate for students, I would say. So that's why I've kind of limited the discussion to staff at this point. So any thoughts or feedback?
Sam, could you just outline, and maybe, I don't know if you know, but what are the current mandate? Why do none of the current vaccination mandates apply to us already?
There are no you mean for staff?
No, I know what she means, like the federal ones and the OSHA and all that, because they don't apply to public schools. We're not covered by OSHA because it's only a federal law. So that's what they use to do the vaccine mandate for those bigger companies. So none of that applies to public schools. There are about 10 school districts who have passed a vaccine mandate for staff, which has to be negotiated through the contract. But there are about the last I checked on the list, there are about 10 who had done it.
Yeah, to Sarah's point, to my understanding, there's no directive for us to implement it. But to your point, Kate, the number of mandates that are out there in the ether certainly lend credence and support if we wanted to go in that direction.
Do we have any other types of mandates like this already built in? Flu vaccine, anything like that already built in, or is this breaking new ground for specifically our district?
This would be new ground for our district. At the state level, the MTA has supported vaccine mandates for staff. I don't think we would get pushback there. I guess you could look at it as, will we achieve 100% with a mandate?
So I would like to, if we just go back to I put it in my report this morning that our first goal this year is to provide for the health and safety of students and faculty. And I feel for the faculty who maybe are sharing a classroom or an office or whatever with a coworker who's choosing not to get vaccinated. So I'm wondering if, we could consider the vaccine mandate. And I feel like another thing that other employers have done is required people who are choosing not to be vaccinated to provide a weekly or every other week negative test. And I wonder if that might be an option that we could consider.
I do tend to, Sarah, I like your idea there around the testing, because that seems to be something that's important, and even, quite frankly, surveillance testing. My oldest son is off in college. There's the vaccination proportion is almost near where we are, but they still have a number of breakthrough cases, and it's more the testing that's catching the breakthrough cases than just saying everybody's vaccinated. And honestly, it's probably the bigger concern is really the bigger number of unvaccinated students are among, or number of unvaccinated people probably among the students, and there's reasons why, especially for the younger students. So I don't know. I tend to lean more toward the testing than to, optimizing the last couple percent, especially given how many of the students are unvaccinated and can't be.
Knowing that this is going to be something that's not just our staff right now, if this becomes endemic and this is an ongoing thing, then we're going to have staff turnover eventually. And this is going to be something that we're dealing with over and over. And so I guess, I have my personal opinion. I have my thoughts on this, but I don't run schools. And so I got to do the rude thing, Pam, and ask you directly, what do you think about this? Is this something that's going to help people that are running and teaching in our schools feel bolstered and supported in health things, or is this something that's going to become a divisive type of thing? I'm interested in your take on what would be recommended. That's loaded.
No, it's not, because I think those are both nice to have, but probably would not be my goal in the program. I think my goal in the program would be to minimize staff absences, either through people being more susceptible to getting infected or to be spreading the infection to others, and minimize student absences, and minimize staff absences to minimize impact on student learning. So I think there's an operational component, not to be uncaring, just about making sure we're staffed. We're having staffing issues with buses. We're still having staffing issues for support staff, subs. There just aren't people to be in the buildings when our teachers can't be. So I do think you could simply make it a condition of employment. We could implement testing as a compromise solution, but and I think I would do the compromise solution to maintain staffing levels if we would be threatened not to be able to fill our positions. But you could also, in the long term, just make it a straight condition of employment. I guess the testing we'd have to think through how much of a burden is that going to place on the district for additional staffing to manage that piece of it. Probably not.
Choosing not to be vaccinated, they can go out and get tested at CVS on their own time.
But that still means we have to chase it and verify it and follow it. And then we'll also have to collect all of the initial vaccination records. Not impossible, just we don't have someone with all of the extra time to do that. We will make time if this becomes a priority for us. So I really see it could go either way. I'm not trying to be wishy-washy, but I think we're in a fairly safe position now with the level of buy-in we have from our existing staff. So to Ken's point, how much effort do we want to put in maximizing, trying to get to a perfect score? And again, we don't have 100% return on the survey, and these are very informal numbers. So there may be more room for improvement than we're aware of. I know Rockport's done it successfully. They're a small school. I'm sure we could do it as well.
Pam, I don't know about the ins and outs of MedBot, but is it possible just to add those questions to the teacher MedBot? Have you been vaccinated? And if the answer is no, have you been tested this week?
If we go the route of mandated vaccination, we will collect vaccination cards and have a master record of who is and who isn't. That will be incumbent upon us if we're calling it a mandate and making it a condition of employment. And then we'll have to notify those who aren't of what the outcomes will be or what the expectations will be.
I think Kate was more suggesting using MedBot for collecting testing results. But yeah.
We can do it through, we have ASOP, and we could do it through our ASOP system where people could just attach a copy of their file and we could audit it that way. We purposely didn't put vaccination questions on MedBot. MedBot is just one simple form that goes out to everybody. Because when we move away from being the employer to being the service provider and working with our families, I think we have a lot of, and maybe that's important to talk about in terms of creating mandates. Not every family wants to be asked or to share with us their vaccination status. So we
No,
purposely
I
left.
just didn't know if it was possible to make those questions specific to staff. And what I'm hearing is that there could be staffing issues for collecting this data. So I'm wondering if there is a way to outsource that to technology.
Yes, except when it comes down to the final verification and validation. So collecting the information is not the person power that we need. It's verifying the information and then the follow through and chasing people who either don't self-report or don't have the credential and need to get it. It's not hard, it's just time consuming.
Do we have templates to consider? I mean, is this something we're trying to take a vote on tonight, or are we looking
No.
to just open the conversation and then perhaps look at templates of what other districts are doing and make a vote on it, or where we intended to go tonight?
Yeah, it's really just to kind of solicit some first impressions. And I would not say this group does not need to worry about how we'll collect it and process it. We've got that. That's on us. That's an operational item. It's, again, not hard, just it's going to take some dedicated hours to do the checking and the follow-up. And if we think that it's an important measure to take to ensure the safety of our staff, the safety of our students, and the operations of our school, then we just may have to put some money into getting a part-time person to come in and process some paperwork. It's not, again, that shouldn't be the piece that stops us from going forward. Okay.
So right now we have about 10% of our staff who declined to participate in the survey that asked if they had been mandated, if they had been vaccinated or not. So that means we've got 90% probably who have chosen and 10% who are choosing not to. And so what impact does that have on our operations if those people, because the rules are different now for people who are vaccinated and people who are not vaccinated. So if an unvaccinated staff person has a close contact with somebody and then has to quarantine for 2 weeks, then we're without that person. And we're having, that impacts us operationally and affects our budget. Avi, do you want to weigh in on that at all? Like, we had a lot of absences last year.
Well, last year I can tell you for sure that staffing was a major component of our one-time COVID costs. And I know we talked quite a bit about the HR ramifications of COVID. So things are better this year, but as Pam mentioned, there are shortages that we still have in substitutes that are very much we're very much feeling them. And I think we're trying to just do everything we can to keep staff, here. And I know staff wants to be, but this is just managing this is definitely an issue. It does have an impact, and to the extent that we have more absences, it does cost us more in substitutes. And so I think it remains to be seen just how significant that cost would be this year. But I'm not ready to say we're out of the woods in terms of rising sub costs due to COVID. That answers your question.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
Well, would they be considered a close contact if they were wearing a mask and had been kept, keeping 6 feet of distance?
If they're unvaccinated, I'd have to go back through and look at the CDC rules. But we're not talking about at school. I mean, people can have close contacts outside of school.
Right.
And then have to be quarantined.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's definitely a risk.
So
if we were
because
going
we
to
don't
pro
need to
con
settle it
column,
tonight, you might want to also think about if you mandate for staff, what would our responsibility be when the vaccine's available for all students to take a stronger step there?
well, let's just take one step at a time.
Let's do that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of political leaders, I know we're political leaders in our little town, and I know people get their backs up when the school committee tells people, whether they're teachers or families, that they should get vaccinated. So I'm not telling anybody they should go get vaccinated, but I will point out that our local boards of health, our governor, our current president, our most recent past president, and the Pope have all recommended that people get vaccinated. So I'll just leave it at that for tonight. Maybe we should, if we have a chance to meet with the META leadership, I'd like to talk to them about their feelings about this. So maybe we could have a meeting this week, a quick check-in with them.
Sure. I think what they've voiced is that they are in line with their state leadership, and the state MTA has endorsed staff vaccinations.
Okay.
So the other thing
ahead.
to keep in the back of our minds is masking. DESE is going to make some determinations. I'm guessing within the next couple of weeks. The current mask mandate is set to evolve a bit on October 1st and allow, as written now, allow us to try to achieve 80% vaccination rate at a building level. And if that's achieved, then we would have the option to allow vaccinated students and staff members to unmask. So it does tie a little bit to the mask mandate. And it does tie to the question of whether or not you require all students to be masked in the future. Because if we are interested in pursuing the benchmark, my concern with partial masking is that at that point, we have to be able to identify who is and who isn't. And I have concerns about how you do that equitably and effectively without creating just a lot of chaos around it. But that's just my impression at this point. I don't know if he's actually going to continue forward with it as written. And at this point, we are not, from what I've been able to back into, I don't think we are at the 80% mark. And 80%, just to clarify, it's building based. So the middle high school would need to have an 80% vaccination rate among all of its occupants. And then we would have to have a list of who is and who isn't vaccinated. And basically everyone who is not vaccinated would have to wear a mask and self-identify that they are choosing not to vaccinate.
Yeah, and we had a caller at our last meeting who made a point that that could be that's really opening up a can of worms. To be fair, I do think that there would be a number of people who are choosing to continue, who would choose to continue to wear a mask even if they were vaccinated. So I don't think that wearing a mask would immediately make you a target for bullying as an person who's chosen to not be vaccinated. But I do think it is fraught, and I do think that the classroom management would be really hard for those teachers to have their list with who's vaccinated and who's not, and identify who's wearing their masks and who's not. It just seems like it would take up a lot of bandwidth.
It may be something we revisit once the 6th grade students either age in, one way or another, age into being eligible for vaccination, because that's going to leave us with at least 90 to 100 students who just aren't eligible at this point.
It seems like it's not going to be a decision point for us in that first meeting in October, because we most likely will not be at 80%.
But just wanted
where we are
to get a sense of where we were at with that.
Do we know where we are? Just out of curiosity, at the secondary building?
I think I kept it in here. This is a little old now. these numbers are higher in Manchester, but this was a few weeks ago where we were.
This is just
in
students,
terms
though,
of-
right? Or is this includes
Yep.
staff?
This is students. So we'd have to kind of patchwork our way there. You'd have to take the percentage of the staff, the percentage of the like how I would back into it with this chart is I would take the percentage of the total 12 to 19 population and apply that percentage rate to our school. But I think if we went forward with unmasking, we would actually have to survey and verify who is and isn't to start to determine a real number.
This also includes students that live in Essex and Manchester but are enrolled in private school as well.
Right. So Ken, to get a sense of where we were, I took the percentage, the vaccination percentage among the total group and applied it to our general population number to see where we were at.
We also have choice. We also have choice students who live in different towns.
True.
Which is why if we would pursue the benchmarking, we are really then in the business of having to account for every student.
But don't we already collect vaccination records from every student?
We do. And we have access to a state database where we can look up who is and who isn't. But again, that will be time consuming because it's based on name. We can't, because we're not a healthcare facility, my understanding is we can't generate a report for our student body. So we will have to assign somebody to go through and do verifications or lookups to establish who and what our total numbers are in building. And that's a great point on school choice that had totally slipped my mind.
And as well as the science goes forward with boosters and time since vaccination, that also adds a whole other dimension to it.
So we're bringing it back. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I would just think that at some point it will need to be somebody's primary responsibility to monitor the data, who is and who isn't, and then stay on top of things.
So I was just going to say, bringing it back around, because not for nothing, it would be really nice if this weren't our responsibility. And it would be really fantastic if the state came out with some more guidance in a timely manner, so we didn't have to make a decision like this about, you know, medical privacy versus safety in the school kind of thing. So, but bringing it back to the staff, you know, vaccine mandate that we're potentially talking about, I guess I will be the first person to go out on a limb and say that is something I would support, knowing that MTA is supporting this, and we likely have a lot of buy-in anyway, that there would be presumably exemptions for health circumstances, you know, of course, I hope that's unsaid, but knowing that this is something that's going to be a continuing thing past our existing staffing situation, probably in future years, I think that's something that I would support as a condition of employment.
I think that we're not taking a binding vote or anything, and if we decided to make it a condition of employment, we would still have to negotiate that with the union. But we know that they'd be pro. Can we just take a little straw poll and see who'd be in favor of a vaccine mandate for teachers? We already know Teresa would. I would. I'm going to go down the list. Eric, you can say yes, no, or on the fence. That's totally fine.
And Sarah, if this impacts anybody's decision, my understanding is that it does not need to be negotiated.
Oh, all right.
That an employer can set it as a condition of employment.
Okay. So just a little straw poll. Eric.
Yes, I would.
Matt.
Yes.
Kate. Chris.
Yes, but I would just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything, right? That I don't know. But yes, in general, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, Ken.
I'm going to go forward and sit on the fence just because I'm still reflecting on Pam's comment around ensuring that we are able to kind of maintain health and safety and also be able to maintain operations, just not knowing what the impact is.
How do we find out what the impact would be?
Yeah, I mean, that would be my concern too, right?
Until the shoe drops, are we not going to know?
Until we put names with rates, names and until we verify who is and who isn't and know what sectors would be impacted, I don't think we truly know.
What if we made it a condition of employment, but as of like January 1st, so that they have a little extra time to wrap their brains around it, but they have to, but then we know ahead, they maybe would let us know ahead of time and we could have a little more time. Would that help at all? What do you think?
Potentially, yes. I guess I'm a little harder line. The vaccine is available for anybody who wants it. There's no waiting to get it any longer. So I don't know that we need to set a very long timeline. And I don't think we need to provide time for people to go and get vaccinated. I think it needs to be something that they do to ensure their employment if that's the direction that we want to go. So
but if there are people who are feeling so strongly about this that they might consider actually leaving their job. I mean, that's what we're talking about of impact here, that there is a window there that would be reasonable to offer. I don't know what it is. It might not be January, but I guess that's the next part, would be the next question. What is that window so people can consider those options for their life?
That makes sense. And based on the feedback here, it's certainly worth a conversation with district council about double checking the authority to implement something like this, what aspects, if any, do need to be negotiated, to just make sure we are in full understanding of what taking it on means and what appropriate timelines might be for implementation.
Okay.
So selfishly, being a late adopter, I also would be curious on those districts that have implemented mandates. Pam, I guess I'm just curious to see how do they end up in situations like, well, we now have 3 classrooms uncovered, or we have bus routes that go unfilled. And I realize this isn't about the bus, this is about the teachers, but just to make sure that we've thought through and have the backup plans for if it does come down to a, one way or the other decision.
Yeah, I think Rockport is the closest community that has implemented it, and they're reporting no issues that I'm aware of. I will be talking to him this week, actually, so I can get an update.
I think there's also a possibility that it could go both ways, Ken, right? That for some people, it might make us a more attractive employer.
You're right. You're absolutely right. What I'm most interested in also is, will this change behavior? So, yeah. All right. Enough said for my part.
So do we want to wait until Pam has a chance to check with the lawyer and do just a little more digging around, or do we feel like we want to go ahead and try to do this thing tonight?
I'd like to have there's some value to talking with the Teachers Association again. I don't want to slide anything through as a surprise that they haven't already hashed out.
I think the best course of action that I could recommend was, if the committee tonight has struck hold that they'd like to pursue a vaccination mandate for staff, first call would be to district council to help us understand all of the intricacies of implementing something like that, including sitting down for a conversation with the association to make them aware of the committee's intent and and determine what aspects of it may be subject to discussion and negotiation.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then I can report back on the, October 5th meeting, and we can, if everything sounds like it's manageable and the committee's still in the same place, you can formalize it then.
Awesome.
And, Kate asked a question. I just want to make sure I don't feel like I answered it accurately about, don't we collect vaccination records now? And I feel like I need to support the nurses here. We do. And it's also one of the most difficult things that they do because they're also managing people's religious and political beliefs when they do so. So we are often find ourselves in some controversial situations just trying to do our job of collecting information. So it can be very trying work for them. And I would offer the example of the flu mandate from last year as our caution in expanding this to students. Last year, the state came out with a very strong mandate on all students needed to have the flu vaccine to return to in-person learning in December. I think they came out with that at end of August, and they backed off it and rescinded the mandate, I think, later that fall because we can't get compliance with it. And that's our biggest concern, is that there are quite a few exemptions, and the exemptions do not require a high level of documentation. So it's just, it can be a very difficult process to get the information that we need. And I think if we're told we're supposed to collect it and be responsible for it, we feel a duty to make sure we do our best job there.
Yeah. And if I could just say one more thing too. So, personally, I'm extremely pro-vaccine. I don't really see, rarely do I see any cases where adults shouldn't be getting vaccinated. But in that same way, I just want to make sure that I fully understand the reason for us looking to place this or put this mandate in place, like what the actual reasons are behind it, because there are some facts that before anyone could get vaccinated, there were quite a few positive cases in school, but there wasn't, from what I understand, there either wasn't or very minimal cases that were actually spread in school. So if our goal is to minimize staffing issues, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I just want to make sure that I understand the reasoning behind it before I would feel comfortable in voting for such a mandate. I know that someone tests for COVID, during the school year, it would probably just be that once, right? I think they would get the same, resistance that they would if they were vaccinated. So, does that truly cost us a lot, Avi? But if it was a situation where they would need to quarantine every single time they were in contact with someone, well, that's a very different story, right? And that could very well be a very valid reason to, vote for a mandate just right there, right? So I just want to make sure that I fully understand the reasoning behind it. Delta is also much more contagious than COVID was a year ago too. So there's just a lot of factors at play, right?
So we all may have different reasons. I would say from operations side, Chris, I concur with you. The benefit of it would be to have a higher level of assurance that we don't lose staff to COVID, extended COVID absences or quarantines. With that in mind, with our current vaccination rate and our track record of mitigation and the actual number of people this year so far that we've lost to it, there's not necessarily a compelling case in those numbers to support it. So it kind of goes back to what Ken was saying. What are we chasing in implementing the mandate? Or is it a forward-thinking thing that we just want to be organized around this for potential future staff turnover? So I think we are right, we could really go either way.
Well, aside from the looking forward to potential staff turnover, there's also the point that at some point we won't have all these mitigation things. We won't have everybody masking. We won't have everybody doing all of those things. And at that point, then it's wide open again. So I think it serves that same purpose, Tim, that you just outlined, when we don't already have this and potentially would see those numbers back up again. Right? Am I losing my mind? Okay.
Well, yeah.
Well, I will say that's part of my reason for supporting such a mandate.
Well, and I think it also very clearly aligns with that goal that Sarah read about providing, I don't know, Sarah, you probably still have it in front of you, the, making sure that kids and staff are safe.
Yeah, provide for the health and safety of students and faculty. So I think, I feel like I've said my piece. I think there are a lot of reasons to, as a coworker, I would certainly feel more comfortable if I knew that my coworkers were vaccinated, because I would know that if they had gone out and eaten inside at a restaurant and gone to a party with their friends, at least they were protected by their vaccine. Whereas if my coworker is unvaccinated and doing those activities on the weekend, then I am more concerned that I'm going to catch it from my coworker. So same with the kids. I mean, everybody heard that story about the teacher in California who gave COVID to her whole classroom by taking off her mask and reading the story out loud. So we know our teachers aren't going to do that, but I mean, there is potential. So I think it's just kind of, it will keep people safer, keep people from catching COVID. but also keeping people from having to quarantine should they be exposed, because the rules are just different if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated for how long you have to quarantine. So I think there are a lot of things to think about. And so I think it's great. Pam will go dig in for some more information and we can talk about it again at our next meeting.
Can we get a professional civics consultant in from among the teaching staff, please?
Yeah. Well,
Just
the
kidding.
issue too is that, you know, just because you're vaccinated does not mean that you can spread COVID. You absolutely still can, right? It's just, it significantly reduces your chances of getting severely ill from it, right? But it doesn't really decrease your ability to spread COVID much at all, you know, if at all. So
Okay,
Since
so
we're not the doctors here, we're
Yeah.
keeping it with an
Well,
operations
yeah, and you
standpoint.
know what, Pam? Maybe also you could reach out to our Board of Health Safety team for their opinion on this. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
So legal counsel, teachers union, and safety meeting group.
And my point in saying that is that I think we still need to be vigilant, even moving forward if we were to implement something like this, because that was my point in saying that.
Point well taken. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for weighing in. Okay.
And I will just, one last comment, if I may. I'm happy to reach out to all of those groups. I think this is a topic that falls squarely in the political realm and in the operational realm, because I think if boards of health, state and local, thought it was an effective tool, they would be taking more deliberate action, and they have yet to do that. We don't have a state mandate, which brings us to the beginning part of the conversation, which is there are a lot of mandates around us, but none specifically targeted at the public sector yet. Well, I'll take that back, not targeted at public schools. So if you look at Biden's initiatives, I think he's saying lead by example. So I think it's going to end up on this group to make the decision for our community.
I think Governor Baker said that he felt like it needed to be up to the individual communities, but he really encouraged individual communities to come up with a vaccine mandate for their teachers. He just didn't want to do it himself.
Right.
All right, but all things to consider. But we have other things to talk about and it's getting late, so we need to move on.
These next pieces are basically tying up some loose ends from last week. So if we want to move to, let me see what the next one on the list is. Which set of goals are we looking at first?
Do we need to talk about our OPEB contribution first?
Oh, yes, why don't we do that?
Okay.
I realize that I'm so used to things going through the consent agenda that I didn't have that note at the ready. So I'm going to pull it up. It'll take just a second or two. But basically, while I'm looking for the exact number, I just can update you on what we're doing. We have an annual contribution, employer contribution to our OPEB trust fund, which is part of the fiscal 16 partnership with META, which has been rolled out to all staff, where we've saved money through migration to more cost-effective plans and commit the savings from those changes alone into the trust fund every year. And every year at the end of the year, once we know exactly what the savings were on a line-by-line basis, we communicate that number to you. And so we did that at the end of the year, and I believe it was the June meeting. And so in looking back and trying to close out our books, we did see that we were short in what we communicated to you. And I have the number right here, by $12,834. So I just would love to get a motion. And the reason that I explained in my notes was just we had some additions of new staff that were added into our pool, created the savings, but weren't captured in our calculation. It was just simply an error. So with that said, I'd love to get that number trued up, which would bring our contribution to $550,088 from the 537 that we had communicated in June. So it's just a motion. If someone would be willing to make it, I'm happy to answer any questions to amend our FY21 OPEB contribution to $550,088, an increase of $12,834.
Would somebody be willing to make that motion?
I will make that motion as stated by Avi.
Teresa moves. Is there a second?
Warnock seconds.
Does anybody have questions for Avi about the OPEB contribution adjustment? All right, Eric,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Kate. Kate, are you a yes? We lost Kate. Chris?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes, I'm a yes. Sorry.
Yes, that's fine.
Ken is a yes.
Teresa? Teresa's a yes.
I said yes.
Yes, and I'm a yes. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Avi.
Thank you.
All right, goal setting. Pam, you have the strategic plan with the strategic priorities first. And that is also what Jake was speaking about in his comment at the beginning.
So what we talked about last week was, page up on this. Last week I had two documents in one was the feedback, which was under, if you look at this page, if you can see the whole thing, under the strategic initiatives and priorities, each numbered priority also had some sub goals, which I think Teresa identified probably were better suited to the district plan. So she's right. We kind of try to smash it all together. So we pulled it apart into two separate documents to let this live. It's a single page, double-sided, or a two-pager to live as the overview, and then have the more direct objectives go into kind of a modified district improvement plan template that will ultimately have timelines and some direction on deliverables and resources and responsibilities needed to pursue them. So I think Jake was talking about the first strategic goal in his comments.
Yeah, I think I got it. I think what he was wanting us to look at was that, and just Jake worked really hard on this. He's one of the leaders of that team, and that team is going back to meet again. So
right. So we'll have a chance to talk through some of what was in his notes.
So what he was thinking was that if you go back under the strategic initiatives priorities, number 1 is the authentic learning environment one. And then under that one, we have the 6, those are what we're looking at now, these 6 priorities. Mm-hmm. And he's saying that that's too many, I'm sorry, the 6 objectives. And he's saying that's too many objectives. We should cut that down to 2 to 4. And they should actually be, more of these should be under the priorities. Like we've got those 4 priorities. He's saying that we should break these down, and more of these should actually be priorities, not be objectives under the 1 priority.
Okay.
I think that's like a good thing for that group to go back and look at, and that's fine if they want to rearrange it a little bit. It's all so important. And I know that group just spent like a whole year working on this. So I'm open to whatever.
So these goals were done at the leadership level.
Okay.
The
priorities?
Taking all of the inputs and creating them, putting them into some type of workable format was done over the summer with the leadership team and then brought back to this group. Okay. So this is a reflection of all of the inputs. We were being counseled that you really don't want to have more than 4 priorities. Mm-hmm. And I think we can go back and talk next week with the group. Remember, this is a 10-year outlook. So the district improvement plan goals are kind of 3-year chunks, but they may be 3 years and then another 3 years to attain the full, and then another 3 years to attain the full goal. Because I think DEI, we know, is going to be a 6 to 8 year process in and of itself, but we're kind of chunking the work over time. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a point well taken, and maybe we can learn a little bit more from our discussion next week.
Okay. I like the way you broke it down more. That made it a lot easier to read.
Is there any feedback from this group on the breakout or at the level of detail that Jake was talking about, where some of the objectives stand?
I didn't see Jake's email until like 5 minutes before this meeting. And I have not looked through it closely, but it did make sense to me that 6 seems like a lot to bite off all at once. But again, I would have to look through this a lot more closely.
But is it 6? It's 6 over the course of 10 years.
Well, we would be working on 6 over the course of 3 years. So, and I think worth conversation is at the district level, different people will be doing different things. So it's not one person doing 6 things, but developing community partnerships for students is something we actually already do, and we would be expanding to incorporate some new pieces of it with the direction we want to go in with our authentic learning. So, Teresa, go ahead.
I think so since you broke it down, like now we're really in the bucket of the district improvement plan. And so if we're really trying to deal with the strategic plan overview for the 10 years, we can sort of set that aside for the moment, can't we? Because the district, or are you intending to have, you're not intending to have us approve as a district improvement plan. We're working right now on this piece, right? Or am I reading that
by
wrong?
early October, district improvement plan should be approved. Because that is the work. This then gets broken down at 2 more levels. It gets broken down at the school level, and it gets broken down at the teacher level into goal setting. So the goal is for them to have all of this wrapped up by the end of the year.
What date, you have a date set for the strategic plan group to go back and meet one last time?
Yes, it's next Wednesday.
So maybe because we all got Jake's letter late, people could take some time to reflect on that. And if they had any more input, they could send it to you ahead of that meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Did you have
further thoughts? Because we really want to make sure we have a finalized vote on the strategic plan and the DIP at our next meeting.
I got to say, Sarah, my perspective on this is when I look at the effort and the time it took to roll out kind of district-wide to the improvements around the social emotional learning, I think Jake's right in terms of thinking about the scale of some of these. And I guess I want to reflect on what of these are a standalone project big, or do we want to, is it best pushing forward across many fronts simultaneously with incremental, or which of these really need to be addressed as this is a significant focus and we're going to deprioritize other things as a result. So I thank Jake for pointing that out and for taking the time to consider that a little bit more.
Definitely.
I guess I would share one thing also that if so, because I wasn't thinking so much of the district improvement plan on its own, and I want to reflect on that further. But if some of these are, like we talked about, things we're already kind of doing, and I know it does get broken down so that we're improving at different levels and stuff, but I mean, are there any of these that are just going to end up being we maintain? I mean, are these definitely all areas that we need to grow, or was it just that in the process of doing this work, we recognized that we are doing a lot of this? Because it seemed like from the strategic planning group that, that this came forward. And then when the leadership group met, there were so many ways to identify things that we're already doing. So I guess I'm interested in seeing as what do we actually need to get toward versus what are we already doing? And maybe that'll come at the two next layers.
Nope, this is what the outcome in front of you is what all of the inputs were when we took away or combined like things and created a district plan that responded to both the big picture and then the more technical. I guess we saw these as more technical implementation components of the bigger picture wants, the things we would need to do to achieve. And I think Jake's right. We are not abandoning everything we're doing, but we are going to take steps to begin to expand the repertoire to include these things. And they look different at different levels, and different levels have different levels of readiness and different entry points into the work is what I would offer. So where elementary level is, which may be some people's most direct experience, is a very different place than where the high school is, because perception and reality of what the program at the high school is could be very different, but we have many authentic assessment opportunities that exist there and many community partnerships already in play. Those don't necessarily translate to the elementary, so it's more new work for the elementary, more refinement work, and prioritizing one thing, deprioritizing something else at the secondary. So I think that's embedded in here as well, because you had a K-12 perspective of where we are and where we need to be to achieve these things. And like number 4, implement consistent. The data collection process and analysis is somewhat in progress as a continuation of the literacy reorg and an implementation of consistent benchmarking K-8. So some of these things are natural continuations, but I think the good news is it seemed like big work, but not overwhelming or inappropriate from the people who will be leading the work.
So when we approve a document like this, I haven't approved a district improvement plan before. I've only worked with school improvement plans. So when we do this, we're committing to this document for a 3-year span, but the like timeline, resources, responsibility, and the deliverables in particular aren't in here yet. So at what point does that get included so that how does that work?
When these aren't going to change anymore, then we'll map out the attack. Yep.
But we approve it after the map out of the attack?
We can, yes.
Or I'm just
I would like some general consensus that these goals are appropriate to what the big picture thinking is and what the feedback. So if you go back and read through all of the documentation about what the work is that needs to be done, all the feedback from the community, and it was varied, does the big picture strategic initiative and the work, the objectives we're trying to put a dent in over the next 3 years help to advance that outlook?
I mean, I thought it did last time I looked at it.
And this one, I think it's considerably smaller from our last district improvement plans. We actually have fewer goals. We capped ourselves.
I think it is important to just keep in mind that while we do have a lot of objectives, a lot of them are things that are already underway, and it might look overwhelming to somebody who doesn't know, hasn't been in the weeds doing that work, but that, like you pointed out, a lot of these things are already happening. But we don't want to lose track of them, and that's why they ended up in the district improvement plan.
Right, and sometimes I would say in terms of operationalizing it, having the goal that we hope is that we strive to achieve is also a catalyst for making other changes necessary for creating an environment in which they can succeed. So by stating them and attempting to achieve them, we may find other work along the way that becomes necessary in order to lay the groundwork. And then that's where we come back and report on a regular basis that we're going to have to carry this forward another year or two because we've identified X, right? And X is going to be an obstacle in the way of achieving this. So we have to go and deal with that first before we can make good on the big idea.
I really have some favorite things on here that I get excited about.
So take it, send feedback if you have it. We don't need to belabor it if this isn't, if there isn't anything burning.
Take a look at it and, take Jake's feedback and look at that and think about it and send Pam any comments you have before that next meeting, which is next Wednesday, right?
Yes.
And then you guys will meet one more time with that group, answer any questions that they have, and then at our next meeting, we will be ready to approve what is in front of us, which might be a little different than what's in front of us now, where it might be exactly the same.
Right, and we can always take another meeting if we need to.
Okay. Sounds good. So that's the strategic plan. Can we finalize our school committee goals? I sent that around to everybody right after Pam sent around her packet, because it was the draft and we had changed a few things.
Do you need a motion to approve those, or?
Yeah. That would be great.
So moved.
Awesome. Is there a second?
Second, Burke.
Awesome. Do we want to have any discussion about our school committee goals? We discussed them a lot at our last two meetings, so we might be good. Okay. Then a vote for approval of school committee goals as presented. Eric?
Yes, sorry. I
That's
don't know if
okay.
you heard me.
Matt?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Teresa?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And so that's great. Those will be posted then with the materials from this meeting so everybody can see the finalized version of the goals. And then Pam's goals.
Any other feedback on those?
I'm good with your goals. Okay, so we need a motion to approve Pam's superintendent goals.
Burke, so moved.
Thank you, Eric. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that
Harrington. Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Any discussion? All right, I'm going to go down the roll call. Eric?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Teresa?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. All right. Any school committee comment?
I just would like to point out and thank you.
Go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to thank you for the fine leadership on this, Sarah, and keeping things organized.
I do
as
my
well
best.
as Pam, Avi, and everybody from administration on getting us through it's now 4 weeks in, 3.5 weeks into the school year. And I'm like, okay, I can breathe a little bit. Everything seems to be running, I don't know, better than what my pessimistic thoughts were. So thanks to everyone for making this happen.
Yeah, I mean, the school year seems like it's off to a great start, despite the fact that we have to continue to deal with COVID situations. And we don't want to be up here having discussions about vaccine mandates or masks any more than anybody else wants to be having discussions about vaccines and masks. So
It isn't the first thing we discuss every day anymore, which is awesome.
that's something.
Awesome.
Good.
And I have to point out,
Process question.
oh, go ahead.
No, point out. Go ahead, Ken.
No, I just have to point out, I did have the opportunity in the past week to enjoy both playgrounds at Memorial as well as over at Essex. Thankfully, I don't think, well, Avi might have me on video from the security cameras, but they're both very well built, and they're one of the more fun assets of the community. So thanks for everyone for making that happen.
Awesome.
I have a quick process question, and you don't have to answer it right now, but if you can direct me to the right place, or if it even matters. But we have a few interim administrators, and I'm interested in learning more about what is the process for finding not interim people, and what's involved, and is that, I'm new to this, so I don't know what any of that means.
Process.
You haven't been around for any of the big searches?
Zero.
So typically, we'll
Which
go
means
out and
lots of us haven't.
No, that's a great question. And typically, we will go out in January or February with a posting and put together a committee of teachers, parents, students, if appropriate. Like on the dean, we would probably have students, maybe not so much on the curriculum role. And then we go through a paper search, which is electronic at this point, bring in our first round of candidates. That group is advisory to me. We usually walk away with 3 finalists we invite back for a site visit. We do them different ways depending on the role, so that that individual can meet the community. The community can have you can see the person interact with different stakeholder groups, see how they conduct themselves, see what questions get raised, see how people handle the pressure of the long day, and then make a determination and announcement with a hope for an onboarding in July. As you get into more executive leadership, sometimes there's some contract negotiations that have to happen between districts because somebody's leaving and somebody's coming and people owe time. So that's typically how it works. It's a community process.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other school committee comments or questions? Does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Whitman.
Thanks. Teresa's nodding away. Thank you, Teresa.
Second, Warnock.
Awesome. Okay, Eric,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Night.